Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Cimmerian September. This is an event created by Michael K. Vaughan designed to read the original Robert E. Howard Conan stuff. Plenty of pastiches out there, plenty of loving pastiches, but Robert E. Howard only wrote so much Conan stuff before he killed himself. And the amount of that Conan stuff is readable in 1 month. If you were to tackle that big Golance paperback, you could do that in 1 month. And see what all the fuss is about, especially if you only heard about Conan and never read him. I have read those Robert E. Howard stories many, many times. I've read the pastiches many, many times. So for September myself, I'm beating a different path. I am reading all of Marvel Comics' original run of their black and white magazine, The Savage Sword of Conan, which was mostly written by Roy Thomas. The large amounts of it was drawn by John Buscema, but large amounts of it wasn't. And we've mentioned before in a couple of these Savage Sword of September videos that if you're doing a monthly Conan comic or two, you start looking around for Conan material to do. What are you going to write? How many giant spiders or giant snakes can this guy meet? That's going to cause you to do a number of different things. One of the things that it did not usually cause Roy Thomas to do is do long serialized stories. These were mainly meant, it's the rule that's broken in Conan, the Conan the Barbarian and the Savage Sword of Conan, but it's mostly true that these are in and out adventures, one and done, so that you don't need to know anything more than the issue you have in your hand. I myself think that if you are charging, I don't even have the issue that we're looking at today was $2.25. That's half of what a single normal 4-color comic book costs you now, but at the time, it was a lot of money. When Savage Sword of Conan came out, it was, 50 cents, 75 cents, something like that for a single comic? A magazine? That was a lot of money. It was always my impression that if you were going to charge that much money for a thing, it really shouldn't be part 2 of 6 or something like that. And Roy Thomas mostly adhered to that, so he didn't take that route. But another route that he did take in order to get enough Conan stories to fill the venues that he had created and that were selling was to adapt Conan stories from elsewhere. Find a story that's not about Conan and adapt it, whether that story is by Robert E. Howard or, as in the case of today, by someone else. Because today we're looking at The Savage Sword of Conan number 221. So well along the way, years and years and years away from the issue that we saw the other day where Conan teams up with Red Sonja. This is the cover. And it's a bad cover, right? What is Conan doing? Is he killing a rat in his jacuzzi? What is he doing? Is that even Conan? We don't see a face. The figure in the story in the illustration doesn't look completely human. I have no idea. It's just a bad cover. That's all. Are those ribs at the bottom? No idea what they're attached to. What any of this means. Maybe it was the only thing I could get as a painting in time. When you're doing something like this, oftentimes beggars can't be choosers. So, but the main story. There are a few stories in here. The main story is by Roy Thomas, and the art is by someone named Robert Brown. I don't know the name Robert Brown at all. Looking at the artwork, it looks awful familiar to someone, an artist, a comic book artist, a Marvel comic book artist, whose name is not Robert Brown. So Roy Thomas, in his note to this issue, introduces the artist. Maybe this is first work, in which case maybe it is a more established artist doing journeyman work under a different name. But this is called Werewoman. It's a story called Werewoman. And it starts with a badly wounded Conan staggering into the fens and mires of the countryside that have a bad reputation. And he is too experienced, too canny an adventurer not to know that when men shun a place so completely, when they talk of it in whispers, in little half-finished, fearful stories, such a locale is best given a wide berth. But he has no choice. He's fleeing from armed pursuers. He himself is not armed. And he's losing blood fast. So he has no choice but to venture into these wilds. And we get a flashback to him serving as part of a mercenary group when they are attacked by soldiers of the king and routed. Conan is the only one left alive. And he flees into the wilderness. And he flees deeper and deeper into the wilderness. So you've got this right here. I have no idea what's happening in Sky there. The plot doesn't mention endless locusts. It's a stylized kind of artwork. I'm not really sure that I like it. But Conan moves on and on until he hears the cry of wolves. and we get a very peculiar visual version of Conan. I don't know what you're going to make of it. I don't know if you'll like it or not. There are periods throughout this comic where Conan seems to lose his nose. He seems not to have a nose anymore. But he feels that he is being stalked by wolves, of course. There's a great panel here where, in the middle there, where he is just squaring off against them. Their eyes and teeth are bright and illuminated against the black of their faces, and so is his. As he tells them, snarls at them in English that he will sell his life dearly. Finally, they corner him against a tree. And it looks like it's all over. Conan has no illusions that he can barehandedly defeat a whole pack of wolves, when suddenly a werewoman arrives. She also is having nose issues. She arrives and controls her pack with a large howl. And Conan is mystified. He jumps at her, but then he is shocked to see, and the reason I know he's shocked is because we get this. Whatever that is, what a bad hair day for Conan. He's shocked to see his body lying dead at the foot of that tree. Did the wolves actually kill him? Is this all some visionary thing? We don't know. The werewoman that seems to call off the pack defeats another werewoman, and the two of them begin to run in the wild with their wolves. The wolves in this outline look like wild pigs, but that's what's happening here. They run in the wild with the pack. And when Conan looks behind, he sees they are only leaving wolf footprints behind, not his own footprints. So is he a wolf? Suddenly the world feels differently. I think we have a description of that, yes? He is aware of buildings, towers, high turrets, shining in the starlight. There's a spelling error there. It's turrets, but it means turrets. Yet so nebulous they do not impede the pack's swift flight. He feels his senses expand. His sense of smell gets better. There are many odors on the wind that stream in their nostrils, sharp and sweet and acrid, wild odors of untamed desolate lands and dwellers therein. He feels at one with the pack, until they encounter the soldiers who routed his men and chased him into the wilderness. And a fight ensues. One of those soldiers has a medallion to the god Mitra. And when Conan sees it, he recoils. Almost as if, he's got claws on his hands as well. Almost as if he has become a kind of wereman himself. He recoils from that religious icon. But the werewoman with the big hair urges him on. They've dealt with the soldiers for now, so they go on into the wilderness, rushing through it like wild things together, bonding with each other the whole time, including holding hands as they run through the wilderness under a full moon. They pass by cities, including a hallucinatory sequence where they're passing by a city that's obviously older than Atlantis. It's obviously ancient. Its streets lined with warrior men and warrior women. You might be getting a hint here with that warrior women of how strange the territory is. When finally they get to... Conan starts to feel that he is wading through enchantment. And he gets to what he considers to be the source of it, which is a gigantic stone with a carving on it. And he has had enough of this kind of supernatural temptation. So he heaves the stone out of the ground and slams it onto the ground. So he has broken its power. And the werewoman who's with him is not happy about this at all. She wants to stop him. She doesn't, but she wants to. And it causes a kind of quasi-mystical vortex. We once again get a questionable face of Conan there. It causes a quasi-mystical vortex that sucks Conan in. Let's read a little of what that's like. As he whirls through space in a dizzying flight, a burst of illumination overtakes him. Of a sudden, he knows. In the dim past, the great god Mitra himself brought down an evilly ambitious city and laid a powerful curse upon the land. Since then, this accursed moor has been a safe haven for all the half-real beings that haunt mankind. Only the sun symbol of Mitra could protect the wanderer from them. Yet over time, the evil of the city and the denizens corrupted by Mitra's runestone, the two flushing into one, which all moor dwellers protected. Thus, the shadowy city would become more real, as this force absorbed the life essence of those who entered the moor. All this Conan knows in one cold, shuddering instant. Now, that doesn't read like Roy Thomas, and it certainly doesn't read like Robert E. Howard. It does kind of read like somebody else, and we're going to get to that. Conan wakes up from this vortex to find that some of the soldiers that they escaped from the second time have killed a wolf. That was almost certainly the werewoman who had been with him, transformed into wolf form. He says, "No!" and he attacks the soldiers. Takes a sword, dismembers all of them, and sees the wolf body. He's killed all of his human opponents, and he's left with this dead wolf body. And he howls to the moon, and then walks off. And then, a man once more, he strides off into the darkness and distance, in a direction he hopes will not take him either back across the waste or into the arms of an enemy army. But if he does, he will worry about it then. And that is the end of the story. And it's odd for a number of different reasons. It's that effusive poetic language, for one. Also, something else, another element in this story that usually doesn't happen in Conan stories. Conan is very much a block. He's a rock. He's not the YouTube version of a stoic, but an actual stoic. A cynical opportunist who takes life's rough stuff as it comes to him. Just takes life blows as they come to him, has a bit of a sardonic humor about them, and is always looking out for the main chance, always looking for a way to escape from the dungeon or from the pirate ship or whatnot. And Conan changes throughout his life. He learns to use a bow and arrow, for instance. He becomes a member of various organized militaries taking a regular pay. He eventually becomes a king. But Conan's essence doesn't change. He's not going through trauma, what we would call trauma. That doesn't really happen. It happens a little in the comic books after the death of Bélid in Queen of the Black Coast, but it doesn't really happen in the stories. Conan is... I don't know how to put this, but I'm not meaning to make the character sound like an imbecile or like a psychopath, but the outside world really doesn't make inroads into him. He doesn't have transformative psychological or phantasmagorical experiences. It doesn't come out changed from them. The whole the refreshing part of Conan is that he's a rock. He is Conan. He is not going to get corrupted by blood jewels or sorcerer spells or the curses of enemy warriors or whatever. He's going to be himself all throughout. I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly. And in this story, that is absolutely not true. He becomes enchanted. He becomes an enchanted being. And he's not the same when it's over. It's not like the enchantment is always the enemy in Conan. And here, when the enchantment is over, he is a different person. He is going to be sadder, deeper, more melancholy, wounded in the heart. He has lost this werewoman and also the wild experiences that he had as a wild being himself. Which is not really a Conan story. That isn't what we want, isn't what we come to, it isn't what we expect from Conan, and the reason for that is what I mentioned at the beginning, which is that Roy Thomas had to go to a whole bunch of places to find raw material for Conan stories. And in this particular instance, he went to a story by C.L. Moore, who was a contemporary of Robert E. Howard's, a correspondent of Robert E. Howard's, a friend of Robert E. Howard's, also a star of Weird Tales. She wrote in a very different register from Robert E. Howard, wrote very different stuff. They admired each other's stuff, but they didn't imitate each other at all. And she wrote a story like this for one of her own characters in fragment form. And Roy Thomas learned about that story. It was rediscovered and republished, and Roy Thomas was a big fan of fantasy fiction. So he learned about it and adapted it to a Conan story, where it's Conan doing these experiences instead of C.L. Moore's character. And we have seen a couple of different versions of that. We saw that great story about the Undying Man recently, where the story is adapted by Roy Thomas from something else and put in the Hyborian era, and it works. But we've also seen examples where it doesn't work. The Fenders of Castle Crimson was one where it doesn't work, where it's obvious that the DNA of the story doesn't fit Conan. And I think that's true in this case as well. I couldn't write home about the cover. Don't really like the artwork on the inside, and the story wasn't really Conan at all. This is kind of the risk you run when you do pastiche fiction of any kind. If you're dealing with the 200s, of a Conan comic book, you are well in the hinterlands of pastiche fiction. So, if you're looking at that sort of thing and you're thinking, well, I don't want to waste my time and be disappointed in that way, well, you know the response. You know the cure, right? The cure is the one that Michael K. Vaughan originally suggested. Read Robert E. Howard's Conan, which is, by definition, the great Conan. Read that. If you're worried about the dangers of reading pastiche fiction that might go off the rails or have its DNA wrong, it's too late for me. I am going to stick with this project of Savage Sword of September all the way to the end of the month. And I'm not just going to go to the issues I know I love. So I will report back on the next issue. Maybe I'll stay in the 220s, see what kind of trouble I can get into. I'll report back on the next issue, and I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.